Welcome back, beautiful listeners. I was gone for a hot minute and I apologize for not posting an episode last week. I had a family emergency. My mother needed emergency open heart surgery. She pulled through though. It was, according to the doctor, a miracle, but we made it. And so now that I've had a few days to reorganize and regroup, we are back. And we are locked and loaded with a powerful episode for you today. Our special guest is Stephen Hansen. Stephen is an energy kinesiologist at the Institute for Specialized Medicine, as well as the CEO and founder of Dynamic Energies. In this episode, we discuss processing our emotions, the Polyvagal Nerve Theory, autoimmune disease, and our immune system. You guys sit tight because, like I said, we're going to get in there and you're going to want to take some notes. It is just all the good stuff. If you have already left us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts, I thank you. Every review, every star matters. It helps people to find us, and I thank those of you who have taken the time to engage with us in that way. If you're still looking for ways to support us, one way that you could do so is to sponsor an episode of Focus Forward. When you sponsor an episode, you are not only affecting the lives of our listeners by helping to keep the show running, but you also enable myself to provide clarity calls and financial relief to my community around the world. It matters, you guys. Every voice matters and every voice needs to be heard. And that's one thing that we really strive here on Focus Forward is to hear what people are saying and to provide that connection and that community. So if this is how you like to show up in the world, reach out to me at hello@rayanirving.com. And now, Fellow Hollow is going to take us all the way home to our guest, Stephen Hansen. Welcome to the podcast, Stephen Hansen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Rayanne. Thank you. How are you?
I am so excited. It's such an honor to have you on here with us today. And despite my fumbling multiple times, trying to make this happen, you have graciously shown up on each occasion that I have dropped the ball. So I just want to say thank you for giving me a third chance with this interview. It is my honor. Absolutely.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad you're doing a podcast to help people to heal. We need a lot of healing, especially right now.
I agree with you. And, one of the things that I noticed, especially when I started off in the field of neuroenergetic kinesiology, was that there wasn't a lot of accessible information out there about the things that, just these massive breakthroughs that are happening around the world. And so it was so exciting when you said that you would come on, because you have been at the forefront of this for, I think, more than 18 or 20 years now. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been doing energy kinesiology since 94. So I've been doing it for 26 years. And in 2005, I started my own system of energy kinesiology called CABS. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've been working with people for a long time. Before that, I've been teaching people to heal for a long time. So yeah, I mean, certainly, I think I've been teaching people kinesiology for at least 20 years.
That's so magnificent. And you are currently, you're the CEO of Dynamic Energies, as well as you work and live in San Diego, but you're there with the Institute for Specialized Medicine. Is that right?
Correct. Dynamic Energies is my company that we teach people kinesiology, and also I also output new classes to help people. And then I work at, like you said, the Institute for Specialized Medicine. It's a rheumatology clinic here in San Diego in Sorrento Valley, and I help people with a lot of things with kinesiology, but specifically the clinic is designed to help people with autoimmune conditions, and just which usually entails people who don't know they don't know why they're sick. That's what autoimmune usually means. It's all the mysterious sickness.
Right, right. And I think it's so cool and so interesting just because, the way that the energy kinesiology works, I mean, there's such strong findings and correlations between the physiological outreadings that are performed by doctors through blood work and, you know, um, not interviews. I want to say interviews, but I'm like drawing a complete blank. Yeah, blood work and readouts and whatnot. Can you dive into that a little bit for us so people understand what is energy kinesiology and how it can have a direct positive influence in their, not just their day-to-day life, but in their healing as well?
Yeah, certainly. So energy kinesiology, I call it computer programming for the body. And really what it's doing is it's finding the source of stress in our lives. And by stress, I don't just mean like mental stress. Usually when people talk about stress, they're talking about, well, I had a stressful day at work or on the freeway or taking the kids. And those are all forms of stress, but then there's other forms of stress too, like physical stress. Anything that the body is having a hard time doing is physical stress. Anything that the mind is having a hard time doing is mental stress. Anything that that we're that our emotions are having a hard time healing is emotional stress. So, and you can also have biochemical stress, which is when we're trying to get something done at essentially a cellular level that the body's not able to get done. That's a form of stress within the body. So energy kinesiology is a way of removing that stress, essentially removing the blocks for us to be able to function normally in our lives, and to be able to function in a way that is healthy, and our bodies and minds are fully supported. And I work in the Institute for Specialized Medicine, and so I'm able to work with blood tests there.
Mhm.
So when my clients have blood tests, they can then find out what is, in blood tests you find out when there's too much of a substance or not enough of a substance in your blood. And then I can do the energy kinesiology on them and just remove the stress from either getting rid of or creating that substance. And so the person then can be tested again, and so they can see real results in their lives without without just having to say, well, I know that felt good, because energy kinesiology is a form of energy work, and energy work feels great. But
Mhm.
does it help me in my life? Well, they get to see that with the blood test. So it's rewarding to work where I work because of that.
That is so cool. I remember a story that Hugo told when I attended his burnout workshop, and he was saying something very similar to you, which is that when his ex-wife was performing, when she got permission for, and then was performing the burnout um, balance on some patients, and they were able to do actual biofeedback uh, work with them directly. And they were able to see a physiological change, not just in behavior and attitudes, but also through the blood work, like what you're saying. And so it was just direct proof that, these incredible improvements and leaps and bounds that the people are taking towards their own health, it was substantial and it was provable. So I think that that's so fantastic that you're in a position to be able to show people the real results that they are, that are achievable for them.
Exactly. And that's actually how I ended up at the Institute for Specialized Medicine. was working kind of on my own in an acupuncture clinic at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I had a common patient with Dr. Alexander Schickman, who owns and operates the Institute for Specialized Medicine. And this patient of his had just extraordinarily high estrogen levels, about 600, if I remember correctly. And so when he had tested her before that, and so he knew pretty well where she was at, and he'd been trying to get them down for more than a year or two, I can't remember. But then when I worked on her in one session, we took it down from 600 to 300, and so that got his attention because he hadn't been able to affect it at all. And so then he asked me to come in and work at his clinic after that, because there's these direct results. And that's really rewarding for me, because in energy kinesiology, we're not just working with emotions. We're not just even working with energy. We're actually working on the connection between energy and biochemistry. Mm-hmm. And so working on that connection, when you work on the energy, then there's a definite change in the biochemistry, and you can see it directly. And so, I think that's one of the big powers of this work is that connection.
I love that you brought that up. I mean, that's that connection and the results are exactly why I personally got involved in the field. And it's why, again, I've asked you to come on. Now, I know that one of your favorite sayings is by Caroline, and it said, it's our biography becomes our biology. And I loved how you explained that when I sat in on one of the courses that you taught. And I was wondering if you could refresh my memory, as well as explain to the listeners how that interacts with the work that you're doing and what that means.
Well, and it's a great quote from the 90s. So it was a quote from a while ago, and science has just barely figured out why it's true. Our biography becomes our biology. And what that means is that everything that happens to us, every reaction that we have, is part of a whole system of reactions in our being. And as we have an experience in life, we will cope with that experience in a certain way, and we may not cope with it very well, or we might cope with it fine. It might be very, very stressful, or it might be no stress at all. And each of those experiences becomes also a way of dealing with experience. So if we're used to, when the proverbial tiger chases us, if we can easily get away from the tiger, then we don't have to activate a whole bunch of adrenaline and a whole bunch of fear and other pathways in the brain. And so that, we become pretty good at dealing with tigers. And eventually this whole pathway of dealing with tigers becomes just second nature to us. Mm-hmm. Now, when we deal with the tiger, if it is very stressful, then we start to activate all these systems of the body, like adrenaline and cortisol, and we start to have we start to go into survival mode. And survival mode, then it brings up entirely different chemicals. It brings up an entirely new way of being, and it actually changes our mindset, and eventually it begins to change our epigenetics, which mm-hmm. is how active each of our genes are, because we need different genes actually at different times. And so our bodies actually will activate different genes at different times and for different situations. And if genes are required, eventually the body will start activating them on demand. And when you have a gene that's regularly activated, it becomes part of your biological processes. Your biology is influenced then by your environment, especially your long-term environment. And so eventually you can have medical problems because you have genes that are overactivated or genes that are underactivated, but all originally caused by what's going on in your mind, in your emotions, and your reaction to things.
Oh, that's so great. Because I mean, that just really brings home this thing that I heard, which is that your behavior isn't necessarily a character defect, right? And
Uh-huh.
and I mean that's just so true, because when our hormones start to start to affect our, like the neurochemical um hot mess that takes place when you've been under stress for an extremely long period of time. I feel like not enough people are aware of that, and then there's so much judgment that can be placed when a person is scrambling, they're in a place of desperation, which really affects the chemical process, and then as you've stated, our environment perpetuates that cycle, right? And then we continue to engage in behaviors and really self-sabotaging narratives for ourselves. So I think it's so cool that you were able to just explain that as nicely and neatly as you did. That's so awesome. So one of the things that I love was you work with the immune system, and of course our immune system is directly affected by our emotions. And you yourself, you created the CAB system, and you work closely with the NK Institute. And I was wondering if you could delve into, the 7 stages of emotion, and explain or help people to understand ways in which they are, in a reactive state or a responsive state, and ways that they can help themselves. Because I remember I read the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And when I read it, and this was like 6 years after I had been engaging with neuroenergetic kinesiology, specialized kinesiology, bioenergetics, applied physiology, it still hit me so hard. And I found myself just feeling really sad, because what they stated was in the book was that they had scans, they had done MRIs, and they had proof that during times of extreme trauma or stress, we really do become brain damaged. And one of the things that showed up was the inability to speak about the experience, where the entire left side of the brain was shut down, the Broca Center. And that was an area that really, I sat up like a little meerkat when you started to discuss that in the 7 stages of emotions, because I was going through this like really sad, just set of emotions myself, because I thought, oh my goodness, all those years where people criticized me and put me down and told me that I was different, or I was messed up, or there was something wrong with me because I wasn't able to interact, in what was deemed a culturally appropriate, responsive state to my surroundings, right? Like I constantly had to leave certain situations in order to be able to just keep myself afloat emotionally and mentally. And then when I read this book, I was like, wow, that's impressive. Now there's proof, and it makes me really sad that I was brain damaged. And then, but they didn't, I'm like, but where's the hope? And then I sat in on your webinar, and I went, oh, there's an answer. There's something that I can go to. There's something that I can actively chase down and participate in my own healing. So could you please share that information with our listeners today?
Yes. So when we have impact trauma, we begin to react. We begin to do whatever it takes to survive, because that's the first step. Is that it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to survive, if nothing else. It does no good if we die and feel pleasant about life. So we have to. So first we have to live, and we have so many deep down circuits in our lower brain that really their job is to keep us alive. And so it's not as much our upper brain, our neocortex. It's down in our limbic system and our brainstem, and they will all keep us alive no matter what. And so if those parts of the brain are active, trying to keep us alive, then it's very difficult for us to do anything else. And so that's one you were talking about, that shutdown reaction, and that's one survival reaction. That if the tiger comes up to you, one way to deal with the tiger is to play dead, and so your brain just boom turns off. And so, because obviously we don't need higher mathematics when we're running from a tiger, and so the brain can actually stay in that reaction after a long time, an extended time, if the brain isn't signaled that the tiger has left and gone to do other things, started its own cereal company with Kellogg's or something. So it's so the body has to be signaled that it's now stopped this reaction, and the tiger's gone, and so it doesn't keep going with that chronic response. So what happens is that we as humans, we have more than just our lower brain. We have our upper brain too. And so our upper brain then can actually tell our lower brain that, hey, I need you to turn off now. We're safe. I promise. It's the tiger's gone. And so that's part of our process of healing is turning off those instincts of survival and getting back and climbing back up the ladder of Maslow to be able to have a fully expressive life again in a way that's not constantly threatened. And so as we're going through the cycle of healing, we first have to know what we're healing from. We have to have awareness of our emotions. And like I say, a lot of these emotions, they stem from the brainstem and the amygdala, which are down in the lower parts of the brain. And so if we're not aware of that, if we become cut off from those emotions, then we can actually be having subconscious emotions our entire lives without knowing them.
Right.
And those subconscious emotions can be at the forefront. Those can be leading our lives and directing what's going on, and which means that our neocortex isn't actually directing our life. And so we don't understand, well, why isn't this working? Why is my life not working the way I want it to?
Mm-hmm.
And that's because somewhere deep down we still have that signal that the tiger is going to eat us.
Right.
And so we have to clear that. So we have to first become aware of that signal, and then aware of that emotion. And then we can start to feel it. We can feel that, okay, I'm feeling scared. I'm scared of the tiger, or whatever the emotion is, and we can actually feel it. And all these things people can be blocked on. People can be blocked on awareness. People can be blocked on feeling. And part of my job as a healer is to help find where those blocks are, and to be able to release those blocks so that the person can go through the whole cycle of healing. And I mean, feeling is actually a really strong block for a lot of people, because we have social mores against feeling. It's not, especially for males. Males aren't supposed to feel, or at least they haven't been. That's changing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But growing up when I did, I had military parents or a military father, and it just wasn't okay to feel. And so I didn't even understand until my 20s that I could actually feel my emotions, and then that was a positive thing.
Wow.
So you start to feel the emotions, then you can heal it. And there's another good quote: "What you feel, you can heal."
I love that.
And it also, to me, adds energy to the feminine world, because the feminine world has more often been okay with feeling than the masculine world has.
Mm-hmm.
And so it shows the power in that point of view of just being open to your own feelings, and that it's not a liability to have feelings. It's actually something that can make us have more powerful and productive lives, to feel it and then to express it. And because I think it was, I was seeing a scene from Airplane a couple months ago, and it was a joke, and it's kind of a funny joke, but it had this woman who was just who's she was screaming and expressing, and since it was a joke, it was done in a way where, and so like a man came up and started slapping her, and that was supposed to be, it's supposed to be a parody, it's supposed to be satire, but unfortunately that's kind of real. That's how we've dealt with expressing emotions.
Yes.
That
Shame people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you don't stop feeling that, I'm gonna come make you feel something worse, is essentially what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that keeps us back in survival, and we can't ever get to true healing when we're busy just being threatened by everything around us. And so if we can just express and say what's up, say what's actually troubling us, then we can move forward and start to move to the next step, which is owning our emotions and realizing, hey, this is my emotion. I'm in charge of this emotion. And then we can have that kind of a little bit more control, because sometimes our emotions can really put us out of control. But once we own those emotions, we can realize that, oh, well, I can influence what's mine. If it's mine, I can deal with it in my own way and work with it.
Right.
And then we can begin to have forgiveness. Forgiveness is the next step for whoever seems like they caused the emotion in the first place. Because even though it's my emotion, it still usually seems like it's caused by somebody else. So sometimes we make ourselves mad, or we do things to ourselves, but a lot of times it's someone else who's involved in the situation. And so we can then have true forgiveness for that person once we've owned our emotions, and then we can go into a release. We can then release it. And emotions are heavy. Emotions can be heavy. They can be like a weight on us. And so when we release them, we kind of free up some processor time in our brain. We have a lot more room for joy instead of whatever emotion was there in the first place. And then once we've had that release, then we can apply that lesson that we've learned now, that newfound joy that we've gotten, and apply it to the rest of our lives. And so all of healing is going to make our life more and more joyful. And that's not to say that we'll have joy all the time, but little by little, we can each time we release and heal on a major emotion or situation, we can make our lives more fulfilling.
I love that. I think one of the things that for myself, it's the energy balancing, it really brings about an emotional balance. But what I really love too about it is that every balance that's done, it's always interconnected into our organs, and so with a lot of the latest studies that have been coming out about, the stomach being a second brain, the heart being our third brain, it's so neat that science is starting to really explore the depth of the way that the energy is constantly, in movement, right? Like we're continually going through these stages of processing. And we're constantly getting biofeedback. And so the brain, it's the most protected organ in the body. And yet it's not the organ that runs the body. Or at least the way that I understand it is that, it's all of our organs and our cells and the energy that we keep stored that sends up the information that then our brain is there to process it and to give it a perception and then to create our outward reality. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that for us, just about how whenever we get stuck, within a certain way of being or a certain thought pattern or childhood conditioning, how that can affect our emotional processing.
Yeah. I have to clarify that. our brain really is running a lot of things, but not necessarily our neocortex.
Mm-hmm.
It's our hypothalamus is,
Okay.
I call it the great, excuse me, the great composer of our lives. And the pituitary is then the director of our lives. So you have a composer that composes music, and that's the hypothalamus releases these short bursts of hormones to the pituitary, and the pituitary then will actually direct the symphony of our lives and direct our organs in ways to function every day. And those happen down in the brainstem, though. So you're right. The neocortex isn't actively directing them, and it can affect the hypothalamus, but really it's that hypothalamus that's composing the basic nature of our day. Now, what you say though is also true about the body and the body directing the brain, because the body, especially when we have emotions that are suppressed, studies have shown that the emotions actually we begin to access those emotions through our somatosensory cortex, so the part of the brain then that connects us to what we feel and what we feel in our body. So what we feel in our body then that becomes an expression of emotion when we're not willing to actually feel it with the rest of us. So when we've shut down a feeling, it just becomes physical. We just work through it with our physical body instead of with our emotional body or with our emotional selves. And so that's tougher to do. People wonder, well, why am I getting this problem? Why am I getting this medical problem? And a lot of people are just healthy until one day, bam, they keel over from a horrible disease. And why does that happen to people? It's usually people who exercise all the time and try to keep a great, healthy physical body. Well, it's usually because the person there's some part of their lives that they haven't been able to deal with in a conscious way. They haven't been able to process their emotions, and eventually those get stuck in the body and sent down into the body, because the body will deal with it if the emotions, if we're not dealing with it with our minds, essentially. And so eventually then we become the person that will affect epigenetic changes in the physical body, and then the person can get sick with whatever it is. And we try drugs, and if the drugs work, that's great, but there's still the emotional problem there, and it's being suppressed. And all this really caused from something that could have been processed in the first place with an emotion, because emotions are so powerful. They affect our body, they affect our epigenetics, they affect so many things about us. And so to be connected to them and to be able to process them in a proactive manner can really improve our health.
Right. Yeah, I can't even tell you how many experiences I've had, with specialized kinesiology, with the neuroenergetics, that have been positive, because it's allowed me to help release stored up energy and emotions that weren't even mine, or weren't, they hadn't played out in my lifetime. They were ones that I had inherited with epigenetics, right? It fascinates me. I remember the very first time that I had the epigenetic experience on the table, and I could hear, I was hearing stuff, I was seeing visions, and what I could hear was the indigenous drumming. And I wasn't aware of where it was coming from at first. I really thought that this was actually, that someone was playing the music. And so I was asking the practitioner, I was like, can you hear that? They're like, no. I'm going, are you sure? And then all this emotion started pouring out of me. And it was this grief, this sadness that it wasn't mine, but I had still been carrying the weight of it, like you said. And tears start running down my face, and I can see this woman being torn away from her family. And I didn't understand what I was seeing. And so they did an age regression to see, what was going on, because I was having a hard time trying to describe what I was seeing and hearing. And and it went back 3 generations. And so the practitioner's saying to me, like, this isn't yours. This is on, this is 3 generations back. Has to do with a female relative. And she didn't know the story, but the story is that my great grandmother had been taken from her family and forced into residential school. And yeah, and she was severely beaten and traumatized and assaulted within the residential school. And in order to get out of, she had her language beaten out of her. She had her name taken from her. And in order to escape residential school, she went on to marry a Scotsman. And then that also set up a whole host of problems because of the abuse that she was now used to receiving. Anyways, that all came up in my session, but it wasn't mine. It was just this vision that came out when we went into a burnout procedure. It was really fascinating. And so, I've had that firsthand experience of having an epigenetic trauma, that's been transferred down to me through the bloodline. And then having it released, it takes this weight off you that you don't even know you're packing because you were born with it, right? It's just magnificent the way that this all flows together. And, I think that I don't know if you're free to talk a little bit about the polyvagal theory. I don't know how much of that you personally work with. Is that something that we can go into here?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. Because I don't know enough about it to be able to speak confidently, but I know enough about it to know that it does affect us. And so if you could discuss the polyvagal theory with us, that would be so fantastic.
Okay. So the polyvagal theory is, it's about the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is really important to our lives. I mean, if your vagus nerve is not functioning properly, then you can't be healthy, because the vagus nerve is what tells our body to relax. We were talking before about the tiger and how the tiger is, when it threatens us, then we stay in the state of alert, the state of vigilance. And when the tiger is gone, then we can go back to our normal lives. And so while the tiger's there, it actually turns on it turns off our vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve does things like digestion and sleep. And so people can lose the ability to sleep and lose their digestion if they're being threatened all the time by something. And in our society, it doesn't have to be a literal tiger. It can be just about anything. It can be the threat of getting fired from a job, or even not having success from a job. And so it really, from the body's point of view, it really comes down to the vagus nerve and being able to keep that activated. They even have little devices they'll put in the vagus nerve now to keep it going.
Wow.
Yeah. I have a family member that has one of those, and she has these little seizures going all the time, and so they stimulate her vagus nerve to stop her body from seizing.
That's incredible.
And I mean, the vagus nerve does so much. I mean, inflammation, the inflammation is the body's reaction to internal threats, and the vagus nerve will actually turn down inflammation. And so it's just got a huge job in the body. And it's also the longest nerve in the body. It runs all the way from the brain all the way down and just hits one side of the large intestine and doesn't quite get to the other side. But it runs the major processes, the peaceful processes of our body all the time in between those two places. So everything there, our heart, all our organs, then get innervated by this vagus nerve when it's running properly. And if it's not, then we have a very difficult time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when we have a difficult time, is that when we're unable to self-regulate? So that would be, if our central nervous system is out of whack, then we're not able to regulate our emotions and or our organs. And then, of course, our organs affect the brain, which then in turn create, this cycle of being unable to regulate different aspects of our, I want to say not of our personalities, but our responses. Maybe is that correct?
Yes. So what happens when, again, going back to the tiger, when we're threatened by the tiger or whatever it is we're under threat by, we the vagus nerve then switches off, and we then have only, and that's our parasympathetic nervous system. So our vagus nerve is the major part of our parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
And so then we only have our sympathetic nervous system then to regulate things. And our sympathetic nervous system, it's adrenal centered. So it just turns up the adrenals to respond to a situation. And we do need a certain amount of sympathetic nervous system. It's not that the sympathetic nervous system is bad, but if our entire life is run by our sympathetic nervous system, then we're never able to restore our body. It's kind of like, having a wild party every night and then having another one when you get up, and eventually you need to get some sleep. You need to restore your body. And so the sympathetic nervous system, our fight flight response that's keeping our vagus nerve turned off, is not allowing us to restore and rebuild and just go into that really important state of rest and digest is what people usually say for the vagus nerve. That's what it does. It helps us rest and digest.
So that would essentially, okay, so if we've got, if we're in a state of hyperarousal, PTSD, trauma, burnout, and then when we get into like this deep survival switching state where everything's been dialed up on us, but then we don't have the necessary hormones and or neurochemicals to help bring us back into balance. That has to do with cortisol, right? When the cortisol cannot be, it's either we don't produce enough of it, or we've been burnt out with the adrenaline in our system. So that's when we're incapable of balancing our system out and bringing us out of that. Is that correct?
So that when we are reacting to stress, we start with adrenaline, and it's one hormone that's produced in the adrenals. But there's several other hormones that are produced in the adrenals as well. But adrenaline is just the short-term reaction to things. The long-term reaction to stress is cortisol, and they actually take place in different parts of the adrenals.
Okay.
And one's in the adrenaline's in the medulla of the adrenals, and the cortisol is in the cortex of the adrenals. And so when the body's been doing it for a while, we start to have more and more of just a regular cortisol reaction in our system, and it keeps us in that constant state of survival. But unfortunately, it's got some really negative consequences as well, like the hippocampus, which is really important for mental activities and now time awareness and just anything where you need to be aware of what's going on. The hippocampus is actively damaged by cortisol. And so, so as we keep more and more cortisol on our systems, we actually begin to, like you said, have a little bit of brain damage as we go. And so we don't want to have cortisol all the time, or our hippocampus will start to have difficulty. And also our body will have difficulty. So, I'm here in California, and in California, one thing that's important is how you look on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, that is influenced by cortisol. And so cortisol will help us keep weight on, especially that kind of lower tummy weight.
Yeah, I have so much firsthand experience with this.
Yeah.
When I started to write my book 6 years ago, I gained so much weight, and I was eating right. I was exercising. I couldn't understand. And my feet were always hurting. And I went in to go see Christine Plum. She is another practitioner, kinesiologist. and my feet hurt. And she was trying to explain to me, I didn't have enough knowledge. I couldn't process what she was saying to me, but that my cortisol wasn't turning off. It was on, like, it was in overdrive essentially. And so I was gaining weight and my feet always hurt. And it was a bizarre, truly bizarre experience for me. And I cannot remember the name of the person. I'll find it for the show notes. But there was a study done here in Vancouver, I believe it was, by a doctor. And they were studying survivors of the Holocaust and their children. And what they were saying, this has to do with epigenetics and cortisol, though, is that the children of people who had survived the Holocaust, they had very low levels of cortisol due to the amount of trauma that their parents sustained. And so it was showing up in their blood work, and they were born essentially with PTSD that was so nuanced. They didn't know it was theirs, or they didn't know that it wasn't theirs. And I think that it's so fascinating the way that epigenetical and that intergenerational trauma physiologically is passed down. Because of like what you've been saying about the way that it shows up in the body, and then whether or not it is dispersed or lessened or processed.
Yes, definitely. It's you can certainly have cortisol levels that are preset by your epigenetics for sure. And once the adrenals are exhausted, then you can actually go into low cortisol, and then low cortisol, then the body can't actually respond anymore to outside stimuli. It can't respond to the tiger anymore because then the body has become exhausted. The body has been responding for so long that it's just kind of given up. And we call that, in kinesiology, we call that third stage stress. In first stage is just basic stress. We all have basic stress. In second stage, the body compensates and says, no, we're going to do this. And it goes into an over energy type situation and really tries to power its way through it. And then in the third stage of stress, the body realizes, okay, we're not gonna power our way through this. We're going to shut down and just conserve everything. And so at that point, then the cortisol will go very low. And if that becomes a long-term pattern, then you can actually pass that down epigenetically, like you're talking about.
And that brings me to another area of your expertise, which is the immune system and autoimmune diseases. And I was wondering if you would be so gracious, because I know absolutely nothing about any of that. Could you describe how that affects autoimmune diseases and the immune system?
So while we do need a certain amount of survival chemicals to activate our immune system, if you have too much, then it can actually begin to shut down the immune system. I mean, just like it shuts down, just like fight or flight will shut down a lot of our systems, it'll shut down the immune system, because the body it'll focus on our external threats and leave our internal threats to basically thrive. And so the immune system, the immune activity will then become less and less. And by activity, I mean partly regulation, because if the immune system's not regulated properly, you actually start to gain this autoimmunity. And as the immune system regulation goes down, there's certain receptors on the immune cells, like the toll-like receptors. If those aren't regulated properly, their activity actually goes up while the rest of the activity of the immune system goes down. And it basically diverts our immune system to attacking ourselves instead of attacking the bad guys, instead of attacking the out of balance bacteria and viruses and things that it needs to. And so, and basically it's like a last ditch effort. You like see the quarterback throw a football all the way down the field. It's not a very high percentage shot, but the person, you're just hoping to get something done, and the body's doing something like that when the immune level is going down and their cortisol's gone up, and it's just hoping to kill whatever it can without using a whole bunch of energy. And so we get this autoimmune process going. And so to reverse that, you have to reverse the whole process of going into survival of their cortisol levels, and so that then the body can actually regulate. It can activate the vagus nerve, which then turns down it turns down all this inflammation that's going on, and then the body can actually begin to attack the real bad guys. And so basically you have to get the body into a more healing state before it can even address some of these. And really, a lot more people have these little autoimmune things going on. They may not be diagnosed with them, but and it would be more difficult to diagnose them, because when you get diagnosed with something, that means your whole system's doing it. But even at small levels that may not be diagnosable in an easy way, the system can start to do these autoimmune functions and start to attack itself. And those and as we get older, we lose the thymus, or at least a lot of people do if they're if they've been in survival a lot of their lives. And as you lose the thymus, you gain more autoimmune tendencies in your body. And so it just kind of cascades until we have our body attacking itself. We start to age faster. Our hippocampus starts to decay from the cortisol levels. And so there's this whole cascade that happens from that, just a little bit of autoimmune in the body that can affect everyone.
Wow. That is a lot to take in. And, and just so that people don't get, too overwhelmed or too discouraged, what are the ways in which, if someone comes into your clinic or someone comes and gets on your table and they're looking to start working on these areas in their life that have been, causing them distress or affecting, just the outcome of their dreams and emotions, what does a typical first session look like? Can you walk us through that, what it's like to come get on your table?
So a first session to me, and I want to address something that you said also about getting overwhelmed and getting discouraged about healing, because a lot of times on that first session, I like to work with a person's their big issues that are throwing out their vagus nerve, that are throwing out that are causing this sustained fight flight response. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's not. I mean, it's big, but it's not. But once you address it, the healing can be fairly rapid, and it can be almost instantaneous, because I do 2-hour sessions. Yes. And my sessions are then especially the first session, to find this major event that is the biggest event that has turned them into fight flight for the longest time, that's kept them in fight flight over the years. Mm-hmm. There's going to be small ones, and we get triggered by a lot of subconscious mechanisms over the years, but to even get that basic one, the basic experience that is putting us into fight flight can really shift our healing by huge amounts. And what I've actually found in my work is that it's our birth that is putting us into fight or flight. That we
I love that you brought that up. Yes, keep going.
Yeah, just the way that we were born, then at that level, we're so, when we're born, we're so sensitive to stimuli and we make decisions. We make decisions that when we get older, we don't know that we made. And those decisions are, I need to do blank to survive. Because this birthing was really hard, and being born is one of the hardest experiences that we experience in our entire lives. Mm. And so it ends up affecting us more than we realize. And when we have something that affects us that we don't remember, it's harder to heal on. And so that's what I focus on in my sessions, is especially at first, are the things that are happening subconscious to them, to the decisions that they've made in their past when they didn't even realize they were making decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really dial it into that very first priority. Yeah. I was reading a book recently, and I can't put it down. It's so great. And it's the human superorganism, and they were saying how, there's been this, when people are born through through C-sections, that the babies, when they don't pass through the canal, that they don't receive the microbiome and the bacteria, sorry, not the microbiome, but the bacteria that is necessary to help jumpstart their own immune systems, and how that can really affect the brain, and or if the babies pass through the canal, the heads are so soft, but that can also affect, I don't want to say low levels, but it can affect the brain with real brain damage. I think it has to do with the pressure, perhaps on the cranial sacral. I'm not an expert on that by any means. I'm just parroting what I've read or listened to. And so, yeah, those aspects of birth are, I think that's so important. And then the energy of the room that you're born into, and the emotional state of the mother, and the way that affects that. I think it's a fascinating topic. And, for you to dial in on that as a priority on your first session, just to me, it speaks loads of your experience and your understanding and recognition about what's really driving, or what's underneath of the drive of our human nature. So I think that's really cool. So now that I hijacked the conversation, let's steer back to you. What's the next thing that you guys work on?
Well, then I start working on the person's list. And like I say, since I work in an autoimmune clinic, they can get these blood tests, and they can find out what's the big bad guy that's affecting them. And a lot more people have these autoimmune causing bacteria and viruses than we realize. Like a quote from one doctor that I heard was that, well, everyone has Epstein-Barr, and Epstein-Barr is just one of those autoimmune causing viruses that are they're just ubiquitous. It's everywhere, and different people react to it differently, but so many people have it. And there's a couple others that a lot of people have, and like Bartonella. There's a bacteria called Bartonella that, especially over the last couple of years, that so many people have been coming in with that. And you can get it from cats, among other things. And so, it's a very common one that people have. And both of these can then activate the immune system in an unbalanced way and make it so the body starts attacking itself, and you get autoimmunity. So typically in the clinic that I'm at, I'll start working on their autoimmunity on the second appointment, if that's what they're there for. Autoimmunity will affect so many things. So, I mean, I have people come in with like PTSD type things, or even other neurological disorders. And a lot of times it's traced back to inflammation in the brain, which then is traced to autoimmunity. So you can actually have this autoimmunity in the brain as well.
Wow.
So you can trace this autoimmunity to just about anything. I mean, to 80% of the things that I work on include some autoimmunity element. So that's what I usually start focusing on the second appointment.
That is so cool. So what are some of the actionable steps that people can take to, if they know that they are experiencing PTSD, or if they know that they're experiencing symptoms of an immune disorder or an autoimmune disease, what are some of the actionable steps that they can take to boost their health with the things that they are, say, ingesting? What is something that they can do to help themselves before, if they can't get in to see someone like yourself right away?
Well, the clinic I work on is that they actually have their own line of supplements, and they're called gluten-free remedies. And so that's the doctor that I work with. That's what he likes to one thing that he likes to focus on is just pulling out the elements from the person's life that are really heightening their immune response in a negative way. And so, like gluten can be one. I don't like to pull people off things unless it's really a problem for that person, unless it's really huge for that person. And so I personally recommend that maybe somebody would find out what's actually causing their major responses rather than just kind of go off everything. I recommend that people just have a full life and eat good food, eat a well-balanced diet with protein and fats and some carbohydrates, and just not overdo it with anything, especially not with carbohydrates. That one's very easy.
My kryptonite.
That's right. Well, and in our society, we had a lot of influence earlier that said that fat was bad and that carbohydrates were good. And that's almost exactly opposite. That fat, there's some fats that are completely necessary that we really need. The omega-3s, we really have to have those. And most carbs, we don't need a lot of them. They're nice for a little pick-me-up. But if we have too much of a pick-me-up, then our body actually starts to go acidic, and then the immune system doesn't work as well when the body's gone into acid. And so a lot of it's just a balanced diet, not having too many carbs, but getting what we need, getting the fats, proteins, vitamins, and minerals that we need.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but for myself, one of my go-tos is, yes, I love salad, but I love my olive oil, and because it comes in different flavors. But it's an anti-inflammatory for the brain, which is so super cool, right? So I'm I feel like a badass. I'm like, hey, I'm getting in my fats. I've got some anti-inflammatories for my brain, and I'm not, going crazy on the carbs. So it's a win-win-win for us.
Yeah, olive oil is actually very healthy as long as it's not cooked. When you take oils past a certain temperature, and it varies, the temperature varies depending on the oil,
mm-hmm.
and it becomes unhealthy, and you get a lot of pro-inflammatory chemicals that are created when oils are cooked too much. But especially raw olive oil is great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think I read somewhere that it's the way that they do certain oils, it becomes a carcinogenic. But again, somebody'd have to look deeper into that. It's just something I think I heard in passing. Stephen, you created a system called CABS. Now, for anybody who is just, salivating with the information that you have placed in our laps today, what is CABS, and how could they explore on their own time more of what it is that you yourself are involved in and have created?
So CABS stands for Kinesiology Acupressure Balancing System, and it's a system designed to bring balance to the body through subtle energies, especially through acupressure. And it also is designed to make it so other kinesiologies are reachable. For instance, I do NK, neuroenergetic kinesiology, also.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very intense system, and you learn a whole lot about anatomy and physiology. And so I designed CABS so that anybody can just learn kinesiology, so anyone can learn how to help the body in some way. And then as you learn more and more, you can help the body in more and more advanced ways. But anyone can just learn it. You don't have to go to it and get a 4-year degree in kinesiology or to be able to do it. You can just learn to help people, and you can do it with acupressure. Anyone can do acupressure. You don't need any sort of tools or besides what you learn in the classes themselves to be able to help people and balance their energy. And when you balance someone's energy, you can bring back physical functions online as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I designed CABS to do. It's kinesiology for the layman that at the same time can get people to be able to do powerful things very quickly and powerful balances.
Yeah, it's like a gateway drug.
Exactly.
That's so cool. Well, thank you so much for, taking time out of your day to help us understand, the emotions and processing and autoimmune diseases and ways that we can help ourselves. It's been an absolute pleasure. Where can people reach you at? Where can they find you at? Where can they look into taking the CABS course so that they can better to become their own hero and help themselves?
So I offer it online. My class that everyone can take and to introduce people to kinesiology is called Tools of Kinesiology, and I teach that fairly regularly, once every couple months or so. And right now, of course, it's all online because everything's online right now.
Because of COVID, yep.
But I also, typically teach them here in San Diego, but then I also I've been known to travel about if there's a big enough group, and I'll teach people and get entire groups going in kinesiology. And then once people learn tools of kinesiology, then they can learn CABS and learn a whole series of classes to be able to apply this work to just about any situation in your life. And you can certainly reach me through email, and steve@dynamicenergies.com, and anyone can email me there, and I will respond, and we can, if they're looking for a CABS class, I can either direct them to one or start to make one.
That's so cool. I love it. You guys, we are going to have all of this information in the show notes on my website. If you need it, if you didn't have the pen and paper handy right then to write it down, just jump over to rayanirving.com and all of Steve's information will be there. And if they want to reach you on, are you on social media?
I'm on Facebook under Dynamic Energies.
Perfect.
And yeah, that's where my business is currently at. And I'm, of course, on the web at www.dynamicenergies.com.
Perfect. I love it. So awesome. Well, thank you again. It's been an honor. So yay. we made it. We made it through our first interview. I love it.
Thank you, Brianne. I sure appreciate your interview. I appreciate all your wonderful questions and directing me to be able to talk about the things that can really help people. So you're a great interviewer. Thank you.
Thank you. I worry quite a bit that I run off on tangents, and I'm just like, oh, you need to be quiet and let the other people speak.
Tangents can be very, they can really help people find what they're looking for because they let people find connections. So yeah, I think tangents are great.
Yes. I tend to go off track, but we always circle back around. It's the ADHD.
Right. I completely relate.
All right, listeners, thank you guys so much for joining in today, and we will see you, hear you, and look forward to hearing from you next week. Disclaimer. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not necessarily reflect the opinions or viewpoints of the host, producer, other guests, or sponsors. I, Rayanne K. Irving, am not, nor have I ever been, a doctor or therapist, and none of what I say is intended for professional or medical advice.